Hello and welcome to a quick news video with me, Meoni, for Final Fantasy XIV, and this is in regards to the now updated prohibited activities and account penalty policy updates for Final Fantasy XIV. This got updated today, the 12th of February, and it needs more exposure, I feel, because there are some changes. We'll get to what changed in the policy in just a second, but they say the reason for these changes include, until now we have operated under the philosophy that this is an MMORPG, and frequent in-game intervention by Square Enix would inhibit player experience. Under this philosophy in mind, GMs have intervened only in cases of racial or sexual discrimination or other severe cases. GMs would not actively take action against other types of behaviour that were deemed to be annoying but not crossing the line from an objective eye, instead encouraging the involved players to resolve the situation through communication, adding the players to the blacklist or other peaceful methods. However, times have changed, and although Final Fantasy XIV is an MMORPG, it is now our belief that it is better for the community as a whole for us to intervene in situations where a player is subjected to the abusive behaviour of another player, rather than worrying about inhibiting communication between players. As this change in course requires changes to our fundamental policies, and such a change would be difficult to reverse, we spent considerable time carefully reviewing its potential impact. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that it is better for the community as a whole for us to clamp down on abusive behaviour, and have decided to move forward with this major change. Needless to say, everyone will have their own view on a situation, so a GM will continue to provide an objective eye, with a more proactive approach to in-game conflicts. We'll strive to protect players who are considerate towards others, and provide a high-quality service in which players can play in a more comfortable and safe environment. Note that penalties have also been adjusted so that the appropriate action can now be taken against defensive players depending on the severity of their offence, and as such both the policy and indeed the punishments have also been upgraded. And some of the things that have changed are listed on this policy, which under harassment now has listed discriminatory expressions based on race, nationality, thinking, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, about state, religion, occupation, organisations, and then they just put etc., obscene or indecent expressions, actions that inflict emotional distress upon content related to historical events or crimes. Stalking is now listed here as well, that's definitely a new one. Disclosing or indicating personal information such as contact details with the aim of meeting up in the real world, disclosing another person's real world personal information without permission, other actions that are generally regarded as actions that inflict deep emotional distress on another person. All completely understandable, I think you'll agree. Under nuisance behaviour, which is a different heading, is speech or behaviour that hurts or obstructs gameplay, but which is not classified as harassment. Even if it was not the intention, a penalty may be imposed if the end result was that another person was hurt or obstructed. This includes a whole list of offensive expressions, including things like expressions that compel a playing style, for example, lack of consideration for another person, and so on. Then the section on obstruction of play includes things like spamming, obstructing progress or transit, improper expulsion voting from dungeons or raids, intentional leaving or disconnecting, monster killing of players where you drag monsters into people to kill them is also prohibited, fraud on trades, loot and betting, impersonation of other players, employees of Square Enix or any third parties, game balance disruption and real money trading, account sharing, exploitation and the misuse of flaws in the game, ranking manipulation such as PvP, and ignoring GM instructions. And as a result, there are 6 levels of penalty in ascending order of severity. These are brand new. There is the caution, the warning, the temporary service account suspension, which is 3 days, the temporary service account suspension 10 days, the temporary service account suspension for 20 days, and finally the service account termination, which is the 6th and last penalty. There are plenty in here I completely agree on, but I think it's going to be very difficult to be a mentor role in this game, especially after reviewing this policy, considering that technically helping someone out, telling them to pull or how to tank something, or trying to explain how to heal something, or, I mean, technically telling them how to do a boss would be sort of infringing on that person. They could say that they were hurt, insinuating they didn't know how to do something. It would be potentially a very dangerous territory in this rule set. It's clear that they updated this policy with the full intention to act upon this, which is great, but there are some activities in the game that I have to say could completely alienate communication between people, not out of unsociable tendencies, but in the attempt to prevent potential mix-ups, or saying the wrong thing and getting your account infracted just because somebody felt hurt. I don't really know what to feel. It's generally great that this is a more ironclad document, and there are tons of beneficial changes, especially when it comes to stalking and things like that, and anything to do with discrimination I completely agree with. But with Shadowbringers announced that you'll be able to do dungeons by yourself with your trust NPCs without other players in their optional way to clear content, it's kind of sounding quite appealing in comparison to going with pugs. Is this the first expansion we might see people just purely do trust dungeons instead of bothering to play with other players? Especially if there are players who are going to actively game this in the attempt to bait others into infracting on one of these rules. There are definitely people in our community like that, unfortunately. Personally, my experience with other players is generally a decent one, and when it isn't, I just try to turn off the chat or ignore the idiot until I can leave the instance in question. But I do feel that my already limited contact with people who just don't talk in pug runs anymore is about to get even more icy and quite distant. Perhaps I just come from a different age when MMOs had idiots in them and we just ignored them, and I've lost sight of how damaging things are. But it's certainly going to make me question whether or not I should try helping people in the game or not, for fear of a misunderstanding. Either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.